Okay, so here we are on part 2 of the teardown for the Schumacher CAT 3000. When we last left off, I was trying to remove the motor mount from the chassis, and I had to play around with some belts here. Looks like I just realized this. I don't necessarily have to unscrew this screw here. I can actually keep that on, and I can actually just slide this bearing right off, just like this, and then this belt comes out, and now I get this thing off. Great. So, where'd it go? Oh, right there. So I'll just put that back on. And it looks like, yeah, so this pulley here, it's a one-way, but this is actually the lockable unit from the CAT 2000. You see right there, it also fits on this lace shaft. There's a pinhole through the lace shaft. I can mount it right there, put an O-ring on, and lock this pulley, okay, if I wanted to. But anyway, I'm going to put a whole different lace shaft on this thing regardless. Oh, there's quite a lot of play there. Alright, we'll play with that later. Now let's get to the front and also remove these battery posts. So my guess here is, I have no problem with putting spacers under it, because, if you're running a thicker battery or something, that's fine. I just don't like how the front one here isn't flush with the chassis. That's just really annoying. So let's see. Let's take this out. Yeah, another one of those self-tapping screws. Hate these things. There's that one. And it looks like they had a post here and here, so they were probably running conventional stick pack rather than a saddle pack. So I will have to find some kind of a lipo cradle for saddle packs on this chassis. Oh my goodness. And they did the one thing you're never supposed to do to a vintage car. He drilled his own hole through the chassis right there, just so he can mount that dumb little post. Man, that sucks. Alright. Maybe I can figure out like a shorty mount here. That would also be nice. Let's see if I can use these pliers to pull this Velcro off. My guess is he also used Velcro, jeez, to put the battery on. Garbage. This one off too while we're at it, if we can. By the way, I may have mentioned this a long time ago, but if you have a chassis like this with all this like double-sided tape goop and other kinds of adhesive goop, sometimes it can be really difficult to remove this stuff from the chassis. If I can do it like with my thumbnail, I'll try to do a little bit that way, because your thumbnail is not abrasive. It's not going to scratch the chassis, but it does stress your nails, especially like right after you cut your nails. I don't know about you guys, but when I cut my nails, if I stress the nails, it feels like it's ripping off the finger. So another way to do it is turtle wax bug and tar remover. I've used that quite a lot on other chassis. It works on carbon fiber, works on aluminum, and you just spray it on the chassis, let it sit for a while, and it softens up all the adhesive gunk. Apparently that's a lot like, bug gunk in terms of its texture and everything. And it works pretty well. I mean, just wipe it off. You may have to do it a few times, but it works nicely. Okay, so all the rear is off. Now we got to get front off. This is probably some kind of maybe antenna post, and that looks like cast aluminum. You can tell with cast aluminum it looks more grainy, and with milled aluminum it looks a lot smoother, and that's because with cast aluminum you're melting metal and then you're putting it into a cast and you're letting it solidify, and as it solidifies it recrystallizes. And when it recrystallizes, it becomes polycrystalline. You see all the grains. Again, self-tapping screw and a metal part. Actually, no, this is a plastic part. Never mind. This is a molded plastic part that's has some kind of, it almost looks like it's anodized purple. Funny. Yeah, anyway, what was I saying? Cast aluminum. Yes, cast parts are polycrystalline. Also, technically, milled parts are also polycrystalline. You know, like milled aluminum, milled, you know, steel or whatever, milled titanium. But the grains are much larger, and so it's stronger. Oh, I see. There's a nut here I gotta take out. Wonderful. Alright, let's take this out. So I'm gonna take everything apart and put it all back together in my own way. Wow. Okay, let's get in there. And of course, this comes with your standard issue Futaba S148 servo. I have lost count. If I get a nickel for every time I bought an RC car with a 148 servo on it, I'd be a rich man. Basically, I mean, I can't imagine the previous owner actually ran the car with that servo. They just probably had it lying around, just like everybody else that sells their cars. They throw these shit servos on it because they want to get rid of the servo somehow. So they just dump it onto some vintage car, and then you're stuck with it. So I probably have like 20 of these things. It's ludicrous. Let's see here. I'll just take this whole thing off. And they work well for like my son's lunchbox. I put these on there. He smashed through a couple of these servos because they're, you know, cheap plastic gears. Yeah, and then when you beat through them, you can recycle them as electronic waste, and then that's it. You're done. Okay, let's get this off. 1, 2, and then we can put this servo aside for something else. The rest of this should be pretty straightforward, hopefully. Let's see, let's take the shocks off since they're here. Oh, yeah, this isn't deep enough to get into there, so I'm going to have to do this the not so nice way. Basically, they used a screw that was too long for what they're trying to do. I got to take this off the hard way. Let's see. Will that get me enough? Yeah, there we go. Okay. These Losi shocks are actually like pretty smooth. And I don't have a lot of Losi stuff. Actually, the only Losi thing I have is a new in-box XX4. I sold my 22.4, and I don't have any other Losis. It's not that I don't like them, it's just a huge investment in, you know, parts and basically infrastructure to run a vintage Losi car. And I'm just not prepared to go through that all over again with all the Kyosho stuff I have, and the Schumacher stuff I have, and the associated stuff I have, and the Yokomo stuff I have. You know, to find another place to put a bunch of Losi stuff is just kind of ludicrous. But they do make nice shocks. I got to give them credit for that. These are, you know, bottom loaded, kind of similar to like the Kyosho shocks or even the Schumacher shocks are bottom loaded. And so I guess you bleed them from the bottom, and they feel pretty good. I'll give them credit for that. Those are nice shocks. Alright, let's get this one off. Thankfully, the front tower is unmolested, unlike the rear tower. So that shouldn't be a big deal. Just clean it off, put it back on. We're all set. Comes off, boop, boop. one area where I will give this guy credit is he did put these little sort of, I don't know, they're foam things here between the ball cups and the ball stud. And that's to prevent dirt from getting in and mucking up the ball, the ball joint there. So that is something you technically should do. I just typically don't. And that's a very interesting plate. I'm guessing, see, you would think that, I wonder what these holes are for. It's not for adjusting rake, because if they were, then there'd be multiple mounting holes here for these two, so I can move this down or something. But I think, alright, maybe I can flip it over, but then it's not symmetric on this side, and this is also not symmetric. There's a little notch here that this mounts in, so it clearly mounts in this way, and there's something that goes in these two holes, but it's not obvious. Certainly not the hinge pins. I can't imagine you would just take the hinge pin and mount it all the way up here. That would be a huge amount of kick up that you'd never run. So that's got to be for something else. I just have no idea what. Okay, let's see. So, steering rack, blah, blah, blah. Alright. So I guess that is the next part to take off, because that allows us to take off the arms. And I'd have to also imagine that similar to the CAT 2000, you can get different plates for this. On the 2000 they were called rake plates, because you can adjust the front kick up, which they also called it rake, same thing. Hate these screws. So I'll have to see if I have other plates to get other angles here. That's kind of a neat little part. Okay, these little O-rings. Wow, this O-ring's cut. It's cut in half. One on one side, one on the other. That's silly. Okay, so let's see. Can we just take the arm off? Not really. So we'll pop that off. These are nice Lunsford units. Very cool. Alright. Pop this off, and then let's see. Yeah, I guess I'll pop it off here. Hey, look at that! And they did the other half of the O-ring in the back. I think you're supposed to put the O-ring either in the back. It goes a full O-ring in the back to absorb impacts. I don't know why this guy split it literally half and half between the front and the back. Maybe he was trying to move the arm a little bit backwards to reduce the wheelbase, but that's a really inefficient way. That's not a very good way of doing it. If you can't control exactly how much of that O-ring you're cutting, you're not helping yourself. In which case you might as well just use actual spacers. So, yep, another dumb move. Okay, so I'll put those aside for a second. Something I want to see on those. And then, yep. So you see this a lot in belt drive cars, where the front belt basically goes over and then under the steering rack. So if you want to take the belt off, then you have to also take apart part of the steering rack as well. Although replacing the diff isn't really an issue, because you just keep the belt in and you just take the diff off and put it back on. Okay, so we will get to that in a minute. Let's just take this cover off here. So I am going to have to get more hex screws. I've gone through so many metric hex screws over the last year. I'm just running low, so I gotta get more. And while I'm ordering those, then I'll have to work on some other stuff in the meantime before I can, finish rebuilding this. I also have to get more screws, not just for this, but for other builds as well, like my Lasers DXS Evolution. I want to get some fresh screws for that. I got a couple of other cars in a building, so I have to compile a big fat list of all the screws I'm going to need, all the different sizes. Probably better just order in bulk. I just gotta find a decent place to do that from. Okay, this cover comes right off. It's fine. This diff is, as I'm feeling it, doesn't feel too bad. There's a little bit of notchiness, but it's ever so slight. I don't know what this orange stuff is. I guess it's some kind of grease that they put in there. And the thrust bolts, it looks like this end is not the adjustment end. Probably this end, but then how the heck do I get this cover off? It doesn't look like... Normally you have little ears that go into either side, and you can just use that to like pull this thing out. But those are either chopped off, or maybe by design it's just a different shape. How do we... Alright. Well, let's see. Let's see if anything even goes into there. What do we got? 2mm. If it's not a 2, it's probably a 1.5. Yeah, that's definitely not the correct end, so we gotta take... Oh, there we go. It does come out. Okay, good. Let's see, where was... Did I lose it? Oh, there it is. This is where the .05 inch is very useful. Yeah, there you go. That looks like a 2.5, and it is. I just want to see if I tighten this a little more, does it get really crunchy? Not really. Okay, let's try loosening it. Oh, that's really loose. Okay. So, I know, obviously I'm going to take this apart, clean it out, re-grease it. So go full lock, I'm going to go back, let's say 1/8 of a turn. How's that feel? Oh, it's actually not bad. Okay. This is what the rear diff, that feels okay. Notice how the rear diff is wider than the front diff. Rear diff uses a wider belt than the front diff. Okay. So there's probably more power going to the rear for some reason, even though it's a four-wheel drive chassis. But that's probably due, ooh, there it is, due partly because you have a one-way pulley to the front, so the front isn't always experiencing constant application of torque, but the rear is on both acceleration and braking. Okay, so anyway, let's see, let's put this one back. Yeah, put it right there. So now to get this guy off, does this slide right off? It does not. Okay, and this, yeah, this drag link, that also, is that a custom part? Kind of looks like it. It doesn't look particularly, like the edges don't look clean. Whenever the edges don't look clean, it kind of makes you think it was hand done, but I don't know. Maybe that is actually a legitimate Schumacher part. I'm not sure. It's very interesting, though. My immediate thought is, you know, having a different drag link designed so that, you know, maybe you can mount it here, but you have other holes out here to adjust Ackerman. Like in the B44, for example, you have a drag link that extends beyond the steering rack with, you know, like 2 holes out here to adjust Ackerman. That would be a neat little thing to do here. It's like a sort of little custom feature. I wouldn't mind that. So I gotta talk to my guy, see if he's willing to do some Schumacher stuff. If not, no big deal. There's plenty to do on this car as it is anyway. Ackerman is the least of my worries. So, more self-tapping screws. I hate these screws. I hope Schumacher didn't include these with the kit. I'm kind of thinking they did because there's so many of them. There's no way anyone would be dumb enough to replace nice metric non-self-tapping screws with all these crappy little self-tapping screws. So they probably came with the kit. Alright, so we got, wow, 2, 4, and then 6, 8. So each one of these little blocks here is held on by 4 screws. Yeah, I did have a case once where I think this bar, I like snapped it once on one of my CATs, so I had to, you know, rip this whole thing out. It's a similar assembly on the CAT 2000. Boy, was that not fun. Alright. So, take this out. It's 2. We got 3. Thankfully these are not long screws. It's 3. And then 4. Wait a minute. That one is a normal threaded screw. See that? Not self-tapping. Isn't that nice? It looks exactly the same as these others. Who knew? Self-tapping garbage. Let's see. It's like playing the lottery. What do we got here? Oh, self-tapping garbage. What do we got here? This is, oops, threaded. How nice. Okay, bets on this one. What are we going to get? I say self-tapping garbage. Nope, that's actually a threaded screw. Look at that. Okay, so there's a couple of them. Alright, that's a little rusty. It's got to get cleaned off. Fine. Steering rack, just really, this is just clean it off. Don't need to rip it apart. And throw it back in there. Fine. This needs some pretty serious cleaning. This belt, does it say the tooth count? 4 millimeters wide, 3MR 300. It says probably 300 teeth. Oh, sorry, no, 300 millimeters, so that would be 100 teeth. Let's see what this one says. I think it's a 6 wide. That's what it looks like. So it's a 3MR 408. Is that right? Yeah, okay. So 408 millimeters. Okay. These belts look in pretty good shape. I mean, there's a little bit of fraying at the ends. Actually, no, this, I think this is the rear one. The teeth do look a little worn. So yeah, I would want to replace, at the very least, replace the rear belt. I mean, they're not in horrible shape. I've seen worse. So you could still run these for a while, but it's always good to find spare belts when you can. So that's something I'll have to look at. By the way, you know, when you look for belts, these belts are actually not too hard to find. You could, when you look at the spine here, you see the spine's kind of thick on both of these. So there are plenty of belt suppliers where you can get timing belts from, and usually the spine on those timing belts isn't quite so thin. And like on the Yokomos, that's totally fine. It works fine. And I think, I don't know, hard to say. Maybe these are slightly on the thin side. But certainly on my Kyosho Laser, they use a thin spine on those belts. And I tried to put in like a belt with the same pitch and number of teeth, but it has a thicker spine, and it just gets totally bound up in the gearbox. So you can't use those. And it's a real pain to find like a bulk supplier of timing belts with those thin spines with the correct belt length that I need for those chassis. So that excuse me, that sucks. Okay, so this, one thing I mentioned in the last video, I wasn't sure if this was an actual Schumacher ball stud or if it was an associated ball. I'm guessing it looks like it's Schumacher ball stud because this is a metric nut here, but it had an RPM ball cup mounted to it, which suggests to me that these all might be 4.3 millimeter, which is kind of interesting. And then this is clearly a modified version of the CAT 2000 steering block. I think the CAT 2000 it just had this one hole here, and it looks like they extended it to make another hole here if you wanted one. And this is another way of adjusting Ackerman. Like I said earlier, you could do it at the steering rack if you had a drag link with a few more holes here, or you can have a steering knuckle with a few holes here, and you can do Ackerman that way. The only problem is you just have to make sure that when you mount it somewhere here, it doesn't affect the steering throw. Like there's this nut on the bottom here, and so if the suspension is, say, fully extended, so if you're running it full droop and then you turn all the way, this little nut here is going to be the first thing that hits the arm, but at the same, and so that's going to limit steering travel just a little bit. But is that really the first thing that hits? It looks like it, and that costs you maybe a millimeter or so of extra movement before the actual steering arm itself hits the caster block. So something like this will affect steering throw, and that's kind of less an issue. That's less an issue of where the holes are placed, and more an issue of the kind of nut you use at the bottom to lock this all in place. Another way to do it would be to just use like a thicker thread or a wider thread on the ball stud so that it just threads into the steering knuckle, and you get a short ball stud so it's flush against the bottom of the knuckle here, so now you get full throw, but then it's not as secure. You don't have a nut locking it down. It can strip out. So it's all puts and takes. These aren't even CVDs. Those are universal joints up front. Okay, but they do have the blades here. So we had CVDs in the back and universals up front. Alright, so let's go through, my hand's killing me, all the spares. Well, not all the spares, but some of them. I had a whole bunch of stuff here. So these, by the way, these HDX bins from Home Depot, I got a bunch of them. They're pretty cool. You put a lot of parts in them. So these are the pivot blocks for the rear arms that you would put in the back of the chassis here. Okay, so you would use this, and this, I guess, is for 3 degrees of toe, and that is, as you can probably see, very different from this thing, right? These are two separate parts. So these are the original Schumacher parts. I'm going to have to use this. We got caster blocks. I can't remember how I organized all of this. These are, I guess those are original Schumacher arms there. I'm not sure if those are fronts or rears. Probably rears. So I would have to use these. We do have some spare belts, which is actually pretty nice. Actually, plenty of belts. Okay, good. Then we have front arms here, but the front arms in this are the stock Schumacher arms, so no worries there. Oh, by the way, yeah, that's kind of neat. So it does look like, oh, that's funky. So really there's 2 holes on the caster block, 2 holes on the arms. I'm guessing, I don't know if you can mount this hole here to make the front wider, but it certainly looks like you could either mount to have a hinge point here or to have a hinge point here, depending on what you're looking for. And my guess, if I had to guess, is other than some weird geometry change, it may be affecting the caster angle on the block. So maybe, like when you drill the hole through the caster block, one hole might be flatter and the other hole might be at an angle or something like that. Like, again, going back to the laser, the Kyosho LA59 part, which was the caster block for the ZXRR, had 2 holes, kind of like this, one with a lower caster angle and one with a higher caster angle, but that was mounted on a single hole on the arm. So when you went to the inner mounting point, which had a higher caster angle, it would mount to the outer hole here, because that was the only mounting hole in the arm, and that would widen the front. Here you have 2 holes on the arm and 2 holes on the block. So I got to do a little bit of homework here to, or really just take it apart and play around to figure out what's actually going on there. And by the way, okay, yeah, so I was thinking maybe the knuckle height is also adjustable, but that does not look to be the case. Okay. Fine. What else we got? Spare steering rack. Yep, fine. Yeah, so these are the original rear suspension blocks, hub carriers for the CAT 3000, and these are the LOSI units that that guy put on there. So you have here, I don't know why LOSI did it this way. You basically have 1, 2, 3, 5, 8 holes, but really 6 of these holes are duplicates. You just move this forward or backward, which doesn't make sense. So really it's just 5 holes here in terms of granularity of camber gain that you can accomplish. Here it's just 3 holes. But if you line them up, what do we got? You basically have, it doesn't cover the full depth there, but it covers a reasonable range. So yeah, I just can't for the life of me think why you would want to do this. Unless there was some other limitation that's not apparent to me that the guy was dealing with. We got front steering blocks, plenty of those, fine. Okay, so here is, yes, another motor mount. Wow, I guess it did come with 2. But this has, oh I see, I think this is the clicker pulley, but it's kind of in pieces, and still there's no slipper on this one, so it's really just a motor mount. What we got here? We have unlabeled, oh that's a lay shaft, I guess the same kind of lay shaft that goes on this, and this is that alloy gear adapter. Okay, yep. I guess if you want to mount non-Schumacher spur gears, I guess that's a Schumacher spur gear, so I guess that mounts differently on this lay shaft than like with this guy here, right? Okay, fine. See, I haven't touched this stuff in a while, so I'm just trying to re-remember what I have. Oh, we got some other mounting blocks here. And for the rear, plus some more rear hub carriers and some front caster blocks. Notice that these caster blocks have 1 hole, not 2 holes. So I got to figure out what's going on there. A lot of homework to do. And then over here, I got some other drivetrain stuff. That's a clicker unit. Fine. Shock shafts. This is all like differential rebuild stuff. Even some diffs. Plenty of parts. Plenty of parts. Got some slipper kits. Okay, this is the ABS unit. It comes with this whole set of instructions, I believe. Yep. It's this guy here. Oh, they call it TDS, Torque Distribution System. So basically you have, you know, on one side it's set up for your slipper clutch, and so you have your typical, you know, slipper adjustment nut here for your slipper, and then on the other side over here, that's your ABS adjusting nut, which would be on this side. And there's basically like another friction plate, almost like a slipper plate on that side, if I remember correctly. Yeah, and it adjusts, there's some kind of friction there, and you can use that nut to adjust how much, essentially how much one-way action you have, or how little you have under braking. And then this is all, I guess, like CVDs and things. So we have more universal joints, like a spare UJs. Okay, that's fine. And we have a whole, well, what's that? 2 CVDs. I don't know, honestly, considering how there's some LOSI parts here, like LOSI, I don't know if these are LOSI CVDs or Schumacher CVDs, but the dog bones are pretty short, considering how long these dog bones are. So yeah, I actually have to check up to see what this is really for. I don't think it's for a Schumacher. What else? There's some more. That's more ABS stuff, leaf shafts and things. This car came with a lot of parts. And no, I'm not selling any of them, so you can just F off. Universals, and I guess some other CVD wheel axles. Okay, and then some legitimate CVD kits for the CAT. So this is for the rear, and this is also for the rear. Okay, but only universals for the front. Alright, well, whatever. That's fine enough. Some blades. Okay. So, plenty of stuff, and I still have more organizing to do because there's still, like, these two boxes here. Like this has, I got a bunch of ball studs and some bumpers and miscellaneous, like bearings and O-rings and, you know, screws and things. I gotta sort through all this. Some wing mount hardware, spur gears, plenty of springs. Right. I guess these were the spur gears you would originally mount on the CAT 3000 with the normal, without this adapter, without the slipper. Yeah, so anyway, more stuff to sort through there. And then over here, we got a few more things. Yep. Those are the Gearbox Covers. These magic spur gears. A couple other parts. Some hub carriers. Oh, I don't think those are Schumacher hub carriers. Other bits and bobs and gearbox pieces and plenty of ball cups, turnbuckles. What do we got here? Some bearings, screws, random screws, hub carriers, some kind of a note. Ooh, I'm guessing those are front roll bars. Let's see, where's the rear one that I took out? Oh, no. Okay, no, that's right. So I guess it is, these are different rear roll bars. So the one that's on here looks like it's the softest one. Okay. Fine. Yep, more stuff to sort out. Servo arms. Okay, yeah, anyway. That's kind of where all of that is. So, let's take a look at this ABS unit. So you guys can see this up close and personal. So this, I want to put this in this motor mount. So yeah, you got your slipper here on this side, and over here, this, yeah, you see this white disc here? That's basically a slipper plate between this drive hub and this pulley. So this drive hub is what's locked to the lay shaft on this side, which is what goes to the front belt, okay? And then that couples to this pulley through this, was basically a slipper plate. And you can adjust the tension there with this nut and this spring. Okay, so if I take, say I loosen this up, for example. Right? Yeah, see, that's totally loose. So that front is complete, this pulley is completely decoupled from the lay shaft. And if I tighten this down, alright, just a little bit. Alright, that's maybe a little too much. Let's back off just a bit. Alright. So it looks like it's kind of sensitive. But yeah, you see there's a little bit of, kind of hard to show it, but it's a little bit of give there. So I guess depending on how new that this little white plate is, your actual adjustment window is going to be very fine. You know, if I go not even an eighth of a turn one way or another, see, like that's kind of tight, but it's still slipping. Alright, I wonder how well that's going to hold over a run, because you know that like for slipper clutches on modern cars, they have like vented slipper, you know, like discs and all kinds of weird stuff. this is not that. And if you're doing a 8-minute run or something and you're constantly slamming the brakes, this is going to heat up, and you might have some variation in braking performance throughout the course of a run if you go really hard on it. But it's kind of a neat unit, so I'm going to put that in eventually. Okay, I don't want to drag this out, so I'm going to end it here. This is completely torn down, and I just got to clean stuff up and start putting it back together. So thanks for watching.